and I'm fine, thank you. My name is Nick, I'm a linguist, and I have one wish. And that wish is to never again have a conversation at a party, or at a wedding, or at my grandparents' house about the following things. Split infinitives, dangling participles, children doing their GCSEs in text speak, everyone speaking common since they took all the good newsreaders off the BBC, how we should get out of Europe and keep the pound. That might just be my grandparents. It's still a conversation I wish I didn't have to have. The overall impression is of I think people have of me is that I'm kind of filled with a permanent fury. That I'm never more than about 5 seconds from culling all of my Facebook friends who don't spell "your" properly every time. Or I'm always writing letters to right-wing broadsheets about the decline of Latin teaching in schools that start, "Dear Sir, I am shocked, nay appalled, nay disgusted." And I have never done any of those things. So I just want to talk a bit about what I actually do in my day-to-day existence. I study phonology. Phonology is a sub-discipline of linguistics, and importantly, phonology is not phrenology. Phrenology is an arcane pseudoscience in which crude measurements were taken of the human skull to make sexist and racist judgments about the cognitive faculties of various groups of people. Phonology, of course, is a completely different arcane pseudoscience. Okay? And is perhaps 10 to 12 times less racist or sexist depending on the biases of the individual researcher. Well, now I've whet your collective appetite, you will doubtlessly be collectively thinking we're chomping at the collective bit to know how one actually does phonology. Well, phonologists study the sound patterns of the world's languages, and a good starting point is that we can take the words that we speak and break them down into smaller component parts, and not all of those parts have fixed meanings on their own. So, for example, e or it's very difficult to give a meaning in English. But Nick, you might say, might not have a meaning on its own, but does. I'm right, aren't I, Nick? Well, perhaps, but I'm right, aren't I, Nick? Aren't I? Well, yeah, probably enough of that. And does have that meaning if you use that intonation, but you can use different intonations to get different meanings for the sound, which is just right? So you can say or you can say or you can say which incidentally is the difference between your dentist realising that he failed to anaesthetise you properly before your root canal and you realising that your dentist failed to anaesthetise you properly before your root canal. So intonation is fun and interesting and useful at the dentist, but it's not the kind of phonology I really involve myself in. I tend to look more at segments. So let's talk about segments. We'll start off simple. Cat has 3 sounds. I mean, a cat usually just has variations on meow, but the word cat has 3 sounds. Now, not k-a-t, like you've been taught to sound out at school. That would leave you with k-a-t, right? And linguists get very upset if people get vowels wrong. Some of my colleagues have developed a terrible affliction called irritable vowel syndrome. I'm letting that one sink in. Oh, very good. Okay. So cat. Right? K-a-t, but we can change that round to get tact, act, and we can change that round again to get act, act. Now that sounds very boring, and you may be thinking, Nick, you're just talking about how letters work. I understand how letters work, Nick, I'm not an idiot. Why are you wasting your life researching how letters work? Well, Mum, it's actually really amazing how we can recombine 3 meaningless sounds in 3 different ways to get 3 different words, and the meanings of those words are unrelated. What's even more amazing is that we know what words you cannot say, right? The forbidden music, if you will. Like atk or kta, right? Even saying those makes a chill run down my spine, and it does so not because they're not words of English, but because they could never be. I'll explain. Suppose I were to tell you that a dilt was the kind of person who, they're sitting on the tube and someone with a baby on board badge comes in and they suddenly become very interested in their copy of Metro. Right? Very interested. We've all been there. If you were sufficiently gullible and collectively, I feel you maybe, no offense intended, you'd have no trouble believing me. But if I told you the same story and said the word was tlid, the result would be a bit different. You might say something like, that's not a word, Nick. Indignation furrowing your brow, a curse on your lips, a broken bottle in your hand ready to slash at my jugular vein, and you'd be right. In English, that isn't a word, because you can't start a word in English with a T and then an L, right? Or even have those two things together at the start of a syllable, which is weird, because you can with lots of other consonants, right? Words we use all the time, words we take for granted, like plutocratic, or ablative, or slatternly, or kleptomaniac. The list goes on. But none of those words start with a T and then an L, right? If a T and an L appear together in a word, it's very likely that they're in different syllables, right? Atlas, Atlantic. At last, he's nearly finished talking. But never tl. But I can say tl, right? I just have. And I'm not a special guy. In any way. And there are other languages where you absolutely can. In Slovenian, the word for smouldering is tli. Now, I don't know if that is in the burning wreckage or Pierce Brosnan's eyes sense of the word smouldering, but I suspect it doesn't matter. What does matter is that what is allowable in a syllable or even a word varies massively from language to language. So it gets really extreme. So in English, every word has to have a vowel in it somewhere, even if it's not spelt. So like a word like rhythm, there's a vowel sound in rhythm, even if there's not actually a vowel. So, Mom, it's not just letters. Sounds. But in Tashahite Berber, a language of Morocco, which is spoken by, I think, 8 million people, the word for you give is tft. Right? Now, I've been thinking about it a lot, and the only communicative use that I can think of in English for tft would be words without vowels. I feel like that's really a low point of the set. So it's a good time to sort of wrap up a little bit. That's what phonologists do. We look at the languages of the world and we look at the amazing differences, but also the incredible similarities, right? It's a very strange thought that we build up, every spoken language you've ever studied builds up its words from this very small inventory of recombinable parts. You could easily imagine a language where each word was an individual sound that you couldn't break down any further. So if you wanted to say I love you in that language, you could say something like what? Probably for the best that that doesn't happen, but you could, and it's logically possible, and there are millions and millions of things that are logically possible that we could do with language and physiologically possible, but we don't. And that is fascinating. It is. I'm not wasting my life. It is. Thank you very, very much.